Okay, today I'm going to show you just kind of my process for building these giant subwoofers. It's a little different than putting together a small speaker box. But like a small speaker box, you got to start with slicing up a bunch of wood, which is kind of boring, so I'm just going to zip through this pretty quickly. I manage the big pieces with my skill saw, especially cross cuts, and then I deal with a little more finesse on the table saw. Once I get her right down to the smaller pieces, I can do cross cuts on my table saw with a sled. Here I use the bandsaw to cut out, this is a brace for inside the box, and the subwoofer driver has to sit inside that brace, so I'm using the bandsaw to cut out kind of the shape of the basket and magnet motor assembly of the subwoofer driver, so that it can fit in there and not interfere with the brace. This is one of the few times I use a bandsaw for speaker building. And both braces are stuck together with double-sided tape. Because the braces take up a lot of volume in the enclosure and add weight unnecessarily, I add holes using the router to the braces just to get rid of some weight and some space, and use a chamfer or round over to just clean up all the edges and make things smooth. This does not help with airflow, but actually Nathan at Funk Audio posted about this once, and he rounds over the braces so that he can reach inside and, you know, deal with wiring and everything without getting his hands all cut up and things like that. So the round overs just kind of help with that. Here I'm assembling things. I'm using PL Premium, because a lot of people love PL Premium because they think it's like super strong. That's not why I'm using it. I'm using it because it's got a long open time. So assembling such a big box takes a bit of time to do. So I like that aspect. And because these are such big panels, I'm bound to get little gaps. And the PL is nice and thick, and it squeezes and it fills all those gaps in. I'm going to deal with those gaps as you see as we move forward. I'm going to, double baffle and things to cover all that up and everything. But still, just for the sake of having contact at all along the seams, I'm not sure glue would be able to, I'd have to be very precise, unnecessarily precise, where the PL can just compensate for that. It sounds sloppy, but really it's just the reality of dealing with these large panels. That's that brace I mentioned that I used the bandsaw to cut out. So you can kind of see where the driver is going to want to go. And it consumes a large part of this box. I'm using the nails and I'm using the clamps to cinch everything up tight, and then I hit it with the nails to get everything to stay put, and then I take the clamps off and move on to the next panel. Here I'm about to put the first baffle on. So I put PL down on everything, lay the baffle down, and then I can nail it. And then a side goes on. And these sides, I'm going to oversize them so that I have a bit of overhang over the entire thing, because I can go back. That's 4 times speed. I can go back, and with the router I can flush trim everything, so it makes sense to me to oversize it by about 1/8 to 1/4 inch all the way around, and then flush trim it all smooth. And before I cover it up with the next side, I'm just going to label top and baffle so I know the orientation of this thing, because I got to cut a woofer hole in this thing. Okay, now I have a very messy shop and 2 ugly looking subwoofer boxes. These are the fronts. I still got to make a baffle and attach it so the baffle will be double thickness. These I'll cut off with a skill saw or jigsaw or something, and then I'm going to skin the tops, the backs, with 1/4 inch material and give everything a chamfer. So for now, I got to let all the PL Premium dry so that I can make the cuts and flush trim and everything. Otherwise, my router bits are going to be running along all this wet PL Premium, and it'll basically ruin the bit. So that'll have to wait for tomorrow. As I mentioned, I just flush trim these sides down to match the rest of the box, Okay, when you're building speaker boxes, whether it's MDF or plywood or solid wood, hiding seams is very, very difficult. If I were to paint this, even if I bondoed this and then painted it and filled all these seams and sanded it nice, I guarantee I would still see those in the right light. They just never go away, at least for me. So there's a few techniques you can do. On such a large box, what I'm going to do is I got a piece of 1/4 inch and I'm going to glue it on there and cover those up. And then a second baffle is going to go on with a chamfer. And the chamfer will help hide that seam. And it'll cover up this seam. These seams on the sides will show. I'm going to flush trim them. I'm going to fill them and do my best job I possibly can. Thankfully, it's only a 1/4 inch, so I should be able to hide it fairly well. It's going to be very difficult for people to see. So sometimes it's all about picking where you put the seams, how big they are, using the right router bit, like a round over, a chamfer to hide them. I got a bunch of seams on the bottom, which I'll do my best. I'll fill and sand and paint over them and everything, and they'll be pretty good. But they'll be on the bottom. So yeah, if you tip it back and look, you'll probably see them. But even then, I'm going to do my best to make it pretty hard to see. Okay, this is quite the moment for me. I wasn't sure if this was a good idea or not, but I've used ultralight MDF. This is why I use ultralight MDF. There you go. So I was able to say that while lifting these, so it couldn't be that bad. Never be able to do that. But it was quite heavy. There's just a slight inconsistency in the boxes on this corner where there isn't pressure being applied. So I'm just gonna take a chisel, a dull one, and wedge the corner. So now there's pressure on each corner. But otherwise, there seems to be fairly even pressure all the way around. And given that it's such a large gluing surface, I'm not really worried about extreme clamping force or anything. It's gonna stay put. Even just if I just put it on there, it would not go anywhere. And then I flush trim that just like I did the sides. Pretty much the way I go about this from now on is put a piece to cover up, flush trim it off, put another piece to cover up seams, flush trim that off. Part of why I use Type 1-3 is because in the winter it has a very low chalking temperature, and in the summer it has a long open time. Type Bond 1 and 2 are both great products, but in the cold they will not do as well as this. It's not that cold here right now, but it can get cold enough that you can't even glue here without heat. And in the summer, all glue dries very, very fast, but it actually manages a lot better than most. You don't have to freak out too bad trying to get everything glued up really fast like you do with Type Bond 1 and 2. Actually, what I'm doing here is just making the edges, which soak up tons of glue. I'm just making sure they have lots of glue and that it'll get a nice consistent hold down all the way around. This thing is going to hold. Like, there's no way this is not going to hold. What I'm mostly concerned about is the edge is going to open. And then I'll have to fill it with Bondo or something like that. This is the back panel. It's a 1/4 inch panel. So I just put that on there. And then I'll go around with clamps and a bit of weight in the middle. I'm using one of the blank baffles as a caul. Okay, I got it all clamped up. A bit of weight in the middle that basically does nothing. But like I said, there's so much glue surface here. It's not about strength. I don't need a lot of clamp pressure. I just have a moderate amount of clamping pressure on there. I can easily tighten that with my hand. I'm just getting everything cinched down so that the glue can actually make contact and get a bit of squeeze out all the way around. So when I flush trim it, everything will be nice and tight, and then I can sand and paint. And again, I'm flush trimming this off, and if you have a good flush trim bit, it's really smooth. It's like just a little sand buff and you're done. Here I'm using my CNC to make the baffle, which in the end wasn't totally necessary. I thought I was going to do grills, but I ended up not doing grills. They may get added later, but I was going to use the CNC to add the grill pins, and the CNC gave me just so much trouble. You've heard me complain about my CNC in the past, and this was no exception. I was extremely frustrated. I wasted so much material and time, which isn't always the case. This was a particularly bad day for the CNC. I don't know what was bothering it, but anyways. I'll have to figure out the grills later. It was not my day with the CNC. I did manage to get a hole in the baffle that fits the woofer nicely, and so I'm just going to go with that. I could have done that by hand way faster than the CNC. And there's everything glued up, and here we go again. Flush trim that thing off. I leave everything a little oversized. Flush trim it off. The box is getting fairly cumbersome by this point. And then once it's flush trimmed, I can start sanding and filling, and you can see this side of the camera, that edge is flush trimmed already. Now this is just regular old Bondo from whatever auto store you have nearby. There are better products than this, more professional products, but I find this is plenty good. You mix it according to the directions on the can, and you smear it around. It dries fairly quickly. It'll start to clump up on you if you're not careful. So this is sped up, but I was trying to go as quick as possible. This is their glazing putty that you can use for tiny little nail holes and small cracks and things like that. Normally I use the mixed Bondo first and then glaze after I've sanded, but I just got a little lazy here and just went to town with the glazing putty. Do everything, like the littlest imperfections you want to do. You can see these diagonal stripes were just maybe my router just slid across the box or something, left the tiniest little scratch. I glazed those too. And of course I needed to hack out a hole that would accommodate the driver, so that's what I'm doing here with the jigsaw. Normally I'd use the router, but freehand, no one sees this line, so freehand, there's nothing inherently wrong with it other than it doesn't look as professional if someone takes a driver out and sees. Before I get too carried away, I test fit this thing because I don't want to paint the box and have it nice and then find out I have to make another cut. It wouldn't be the end of the world if I had to do that, but it's certainly not something I want to do. Then I sand everything nice and smooth, sand all the Bondo flush, and then I give everything a chamfer. All the edges get a 45-degree chamfer, and the baffle gets a 22.5-degree chamfer. And there's the box ready for paint. It's fully sanded, chamfered, ready to go. I've even done a little bit of hand sanding. Thanks for watching, guys, and stick around for part 2. Talk to you later.